Number 1.
Francillon Pierre was last seen in North Las Vegas, Nevada on August 2, 1986. His mother, Amy Elizabeth Luster, and his stepfather, Mahaly Luster, both stated that the child was last seen at the Broadacres swap meet. Amy reported that they stopped at a food stand at approximately 11:30 a.m. and purchased food. Mahaly stated he wanted to buy Francillon a bicycle. When they last saw Francillon, he was standing at the entrance, which was approximately 6 to 9 feet away from them at the time. While they were both busy with the food and the bicycle, Francillon disappeared and was never seen or heard from again. Prior to Francillon's disappearance, Amy and Mahaly were charged with felony child abuse in connection to them beating Francillon with a belt and caused 30 to 40 welts to form on his back. He was placed in foster care following the abuse, and Amy and Mahaly were jailed. Amy admitted to beating the child with a belt, and Mahaly, who is commonly known as Lee, also stated he had beat the boy. The two were released from jail in April of 1986 after Amy and Lee posted bail. While the case against them for child abuse was still open, Francillon was eventually taken out of foster care and returned to her and his custody. Social workers attempted to make visits to Francillon's home to check up on his welfare, but Amy refused this and said it wouldn't work. The abuse patterns returned in July of 1986, when friends and neighbors of the family noticed that Francillon had bruises. Amy stated that she had beat the child because he urinated on the floor and set small fires in the house. Amy also has bruises and told those close to her that Lee has beaten her on multiple occasions. Lee would later admit that he would make Francillon run around in circles around the coffee table as punishment, and once forced the child to sleep outside one night. A friend of Amy's also came forward and stated she had noticed a severe burn on his hand and scratches on his face. Amy stated that these injuries were the result of an accident. A hearing for the child abuse charges was scheduled 24 days after he disappeared on August 26, 1986. Social workers were also supposed to check up on Francillon 2 weeks prior to the hearing, but it never occurred. After Francillon was reported missing, Amy and Lee were both subjected to lie detector tests and failed both of them. They would later be charged with obstruction of justice because they lied about a Minecraft of things which included their backgrounds, jobs, where they lived, as well as the events which lead up to the child's disappearance. Amy at one point stated she never left Francillon with a babysitter, but later said she did. Authorities always doubted the story that Francillon disappeared from the swap meet. Numerous witnesses said they never saw the child at the area, and investigators believe he never even went there. Family members of Francillon also said that they hadn't seen the child since possibly 2 weeks before he disappeared. Amy claimed that 2 people had babysat for the child approximately 2 days before his disappearance, but the people she named denied this. Neighbors observed Amy and Lee leaving their residence on the morning that Francillon was reported as missing. The couple later pleaded guilty to some of the charges in relation to obstruction of justice. Amy was sentenced to 3 months in prison and Lee was sentenced to 5 months in prison. While they served their sentences, the Lusters exchanged many letters with each other. Correction officers later seized them as evidence. They wrote little about their son's disappearance. In one of these letters, Amy wrote, "Just as you couldn't stand to send me to prison, I cannot stand to see you hate me. That hurts more than prison. Can you still love me? Forgive me for falling short." In another one, Amy wrote, "What happened was totally unintentional. I'm sorry, you know that." In addition to the very odd letters, 2 witnesses reported during a jail visit they heard Lee say Amy killed the baby and Amy killed him. "I know Amy killed him." The 2 witnesses came forward with their statements in 1987 and said they recognized Lee from his pictures in newspapers. In the initial stages of the investigation, the Lusters implicated Francillon's biological father, Jean Pierre, in the boy's disappearance. He lived in Haiti at the time of his son's disappearance, and investigators searched his apartment but found no sign of Francillon. He and Amy divorced in 1985 and Amy won custody of the child. Jean traveled for Nevada and took a lie detector test and passed. He is not considered a suspect in his son's disappearance. Lee and Amy moved to Palm Beach County, Florida about 11 months after Francillon disappeared and have lived in various other areas of Florida since. In February of 2019, Amy was arrested and charged with Francillon's murder. While authorities have yet to recover Francillon's remains, they have said they have a very well-compound circumstantial case against her, which included the letters and incriminating statements that were mentioned above. She agreed to be extradited to Nevada. She has not confessed to actually killing the child, and Lee has said she didn't actually murder him. Authorities believe that Francillon was the victim of foul play at the hands of his mother and that he is deceased. Despite the charges, Francillon's case is still classified as a non-family abduction. His body has never been recovered. If you have any information concerning this case, please contact North Las Vegas Police Department 702-649-9111.
Number 2.
Tammy was last seen at approximately 7:45 a.m. in Eldon, Missouri. She was last seen at Eldon High School, but according to her mother's live-in boyfriend at the time, Martin Dean Priest, she did not actually go inside the building. He pulled up to the curb and asked her where she was going. Tammy reportedly told him that she was going to skip school and meet with friends at Rock Island Park. Priest offered to take her there. She was witnessed getting into a blue Plymouth outside of the school. She never attended her classes that day and has never been seen or heard from again. Her family reported her disappearance that afternoon. Martin is the prime suspect in Tammy's disappearance. In 1980, he was sentenced to 25 years in prison for second-degree murder in the death of a 13-year-old girl. He was dating the victim's mother at the time. He served approximately 3 years in prison before being released when the verdict was overturned on appeal. Tammy's mother, Tammy Cutchen, told police that Martin originally stated Tammy very likely ran away from home and offered to help put up missing posters of her. He later claimed he had Tammy and that she would only be able to see her daughter again through him. Sandra informed police of Martin's allegations and sayings. Police advised her to keep a journal or diary and wrote down what Martin tells her in case something he says leads to the whereabouts of Tammy. She maintained a relationship with him for a while in hopes he would reveal where she is. Cutchen cut off all contact with Martin after an incident where he threw all of her furniture out on the lawn in an argument. The police were called regarding this, and as a result all contact was stopped between them. Months after Tammy disappeared, he was accused in the 1984 double slaying of William Mayhew and Frieda Bailiff. He was convicted of killing William but acquitted of Frieda's death. He was sentenced to life imprisonment for the crime. November 16, 1984, exactly 7 months to the day that Tammy vanished, 15-year-old Katrina Cheeley disappeared from her home in Wichita, Kansas. Priest offered to drive her to school because she was running late. Her case was initially treated as a runaway case. On February 28, 1985, a can collector found Katrina's body in a culvert on 151st Street West. She was shot to death. Priest was originally charged with killing her, but he was acquitted during his trial. On January 5, 2016, Martin was charged with capital murder in Tammy's case. He allegedly knocked Tammy unconscious before raping and strangling her in the back of his car. The break in her disappearance case came when a witness to the crime gave authorities the information they needed to charge Martin with her death. The witness was Martin's 13-year-old nephew, David Nicholas. He was inside of the car at the time of Tammy's murder and was friends with her and had a crush on her at the time. According to his testimony, he was riding in the car with Martin when they noticed Tammy smoking outside of the school that morning. He pulled over and had David convince Tammy to get in the car. David stated Tammy appeared to be nervous for unknown reasons at the time. When they stopped to use the bathroom, Tammy attempted to run away from the car, but David managed to get her to come back. At some point during the ride, Martin said he knew David and Tammy were together and that they should have sex. Tammy regained consciousness at some point and said no before Martin ultimately strangled her to death. They transported Tammy's body along a back road from the Bagnell Dam area and got lost a few times. They arrived at David's mother's house and took Tammy's body to a back bedroom. She was soon discovered by other family members. David's older brother, Michael Nicholas, recounted the entire scene. He recalls how their mother yelled at Martin for what happened to Tammy. No one chose to contact police and instead decided to hide Tammy's body. Martin returned to the home that night with a barrel and tools they would use to conceal Tammy's remains. He made David come with him. They placed Tammy's body in the barrel and sealed it. They then out it inside of a hole and buried it. David attempted to lead investigators to her remains, but a search turned up no sign of Tammy's body. He never revealed what he saw in order to protect his mother and brother. Martin maintained his innocence throughout his 2018 trial and claimed he had nothing to do with Tammy's presumed murder. His defense argued and claimed the brothers were liars and pointed out their criminal histories as adults. Martin was convicted of killing Tammy and was sentenced to life in prison. He won't eligible for parole in Kansas for 25 years. Tammy remains missing, and her whereabouts unknown. Her disappearance is classified as a non-family abduction by various missing children agencies. If you have any information concerning this case, please contact Eldon Police Department 573-392-5611.
Number 3.
Kelly Jean Harris was last seen in Jackson, Michigan on August 10, 1984. She was last seen as she rode her bicycle near her family's home in the 100 block of Lincoln Court. She disappeared and was never seen or heard from again. Her family reported her missing later that evening, when she never returned home. Kelly's bike, which is described as a red 3-speed bicycle, was later found at the entrance of Ella Sharp Park, which is located quite a distance away from her home. Her family later learned that Kelly had purchased a bus ticket to Detroit, Michigan, and was observed boarding a bus to Detroit at the local bus station. Authorities initially classified Kelly's disappearance as that of a runaway. She was upset on the day of her disappearance because she was not allowed to attend the local fair. Her family maintained that she would not leave, and authorities now suspect that Kelly met with foul play. Authorities always believed that Kelly's stepfather, Leonard Victor Hugo, was responsible for Kelly's disappearance. He has a history of violent behavior and child molestation. Most of this occurred before he met Kelly and had her as his stepdaughter. Hugo and Kelly's mother, Carol Hugo, divorced in 1994. Hugo would later be convicted for robbery and sexual battery in Florida in 1993. In that same year, he also raped and murdered a mother and her daughter in Mechanipe, Florida. Carol stated that Hugo and Kelly's relationship was strained in 1984. She believed that Hugo had killed Kelly in 1984. She confronted him about Kelly's disappearance, which is what caused their divorce. He originally told authorities that he believed Kelly ran away from home and refused to cooperate with authorities regarding Kelly's disappearance for more than 2 decades. In 2006, Hugo confessed to raping and killing Kelly on the day of her disappearance. He confessed to investigator Mel Hartman with the Jackson County Prosecutor's Office, who visited him in Florida. Hugo told the investigator that he told Kelly he would take her to the local fair, but instead he took her to the St. John's School where he worked. He then said that he sexually assaulted Kelly there and then took her to the Jackson Community College, where they stabbed her to death. Blood evidence was recovered to concur his statements. Hugo said that he buried Kelly in a shallow grave. He was taken to Michigan in 2006 to lead investigators to the location of Harris's remains. Her remains were never found. It's possible that Kelly's remains were disinterred and scattered by animals. Hugo cannot be charged with Kelly's murder until 2033, when he finishes his Florida sentence. By then, he will be well over 90 years of age. In 2009, Carol held a remembrance for her daughter and spoke about her life prior to her alleged murder. She was described as a feisty but loving girl. She loved her younger sister, Kristen, and was close to Carol. Kelly Jean has never been recovered, and foul play is suspected in her case, which remains classified as a non-family abduction. Some agencies may list August 11th or 14th as her date of disappearance. If you have any information concerning this case, please contact Jackson County Sheriff's Office 517-788-4200.
Number 4.
Michael was last seen in San Benito, Texas on July 12, 1977. He disappeared while playing outside of his family's home and has not been seen or heard from since. His mother noticed police of the child's disappearance in the afternoon. An extensive search of the area turned up no sign of him. An unconfirmed sighting of Michael was reported by a neighbor of his. The neighbor said he had seen Michael walking along Alamo Street. His mother, Anadelia Cavazos, stated that her son was on his way to visit his aunt. This information has not been confirmed. Authorities initially believed that the boy had drowned in a drainage ditch. He liked to play in an area near the ditch, and investigators thought it was possible he had fallen in and drowned. If this is what happened, Michael's body was not found. It's possible his body was swept away by the current. Anadelia is said to be the primary suspect in her son's disappearance. 1 year before Michael's disappearance, one of his brothers died of sudden infant death syndrome, which for short is known as SIDS. Another one of his brothers may have also died in the months after his disappearance. Anadelia left the area in the middle of the investigation and lost contact with police handling his disappearance. She passed a polygraph in relation to her son's case. She has had several other children with different men, but Ha Denver married. It's unknown as to who was Michael's father. He now lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Michael's disappearance remains unsolved. Due to lack of evidence, various missing children sites list him as a non-family abduction. If you have any information concerning this case, please contact San Benito Police Department 956-361-3880.
Number 5.
Judith Rahn stepped into her apartment building on Merrimack Street shortly after midnight to discover that every single hallway light was out in the 3-story building where she lived with her daughter, Laureen. Judith had just come home from an out-of-town tennis tournament she'd attended with her boyfriend. Normally, her 14-year-old daughter would tag along, however, Laureen had asked Judith if she could skip the outing this time, and Judith obliged. As she walked into her second-floor apartment, Judith noticed that the front door was unlocked and the back door was wide open. She entered Laureen's bedroom to check on her sleeping daughter, only to discover that Laureen was not in her bed. One of Laureen's girlfriends who had been visiting that night was sleeping in her bed. When Judith asked the young girl where her daughter was, the girl said that Laureen was sleeping on the couch. Well, there were both a blanket and pillow on the couch and Laureen's brand new sneakers were out in the living room. Laureen was nowhere to be seen. According to the New Hampshire Department of Justice, Judith called the police at 3:45 that morning to report Laureen missing. While Judith had been gone the previous evening, Laureen invited her girlfriend and a male friend over, and the three hung out in the apartment drinking alcohol. At one point the male friend thought he heard someone in the hallway, and thinking that it may be Judith, left the apartment by the back door and was certain that he heard Laureen lock it behind him. This friend later committed suicide in 1985. Authorities never considered him a suspect in this case, but how they came to this conclusion is unknown, as is the reason for taking his own life. It would later be discovered that someone's had gone to the trouble of unscrewing all the light bulbs in the apartment building that same night. Police initially treated the case as a runaway situation, despite the fact that Laureen left her purse and other personal belongings behind. As weeks went by they changed their stance and stated that it appeared that Laureen stepped out willingly with the intention of going back inside, but met with foul play. In October of that same year, Judith discovered odd charges made to her home phone. 3 calls had been made 3 months after Laureen went missing from a motel out in Santa Monica, California. 2 of the calls were made to a motel in Santa Ana and 1 to a teen sexual assistance hotline. In 1980, calls could be charged to your own number by calling the phone company and entering a PIN code. Doing this cost less than placing a collect call. However, Judith had absolutely no connections to anyone in California. After some investigating, it was discovered that the teen sexual assistance hotline was run by some unnamed physician out in California. When initially questioned, the physician claimed to know nothing about that call. Curiously, 5 years later, this supposed physician would change his story and claim that runaway girls often visited his wife at their home, and he recalled that one of those girls may have been from New Hampshire and was about the same age as Laureen. As there is so little information about this case, not only is the physician's name a mystery, but what his wife had to do with runaway girls is as well. To make things even more confusing, this person directed authorities' attention to an adult film star of that time named Annie Sprinkle. According to him, his wife and Annie Sprinkle once worked together in the fashion industry, and he told them that Annie could provide information about these runaways. Investigators did look into this angle and even watched some of Annie Sprinkle's movies to see if they could spot Laureen, but no evidence was found, and Annie has never been implicated. While Annie Sprinkle did have an extensive background in the adult film industry during the 1970s and 80s, she has since built a successful post-porn career, receiving her doctorate in human sexuality, and is a prominent feminist figure in the world of sexual education. While I highly doubt Annie Sprinkle had anything to do with Laureen's disappearance, I have to wonder about this self-proclaimed physician. In 1986, an investigator discovered that one of the motels in California had been used by a child pornographer who went by the name Dr. Z. According to the Charlie Project, investigators were unable to link this Dr. Z to the teen hotline and were also unable to identify whether or not child pornography was linked to Laureen's disappearance. How they came to that conclusion is beyond me, and I completely disagree with them. I believe it is a little too coincidental that a so-called physician was linked to that teen hotline and one of the motels connected to these phone calls was used by a child pornographer who called himself Dr. Z. I attempted to do a little digging around online to see if I could find any information about this Dr. Z but was unsuccessful. Then again, I was also a touch apprehensive about doing too much digging given the subject matter. It was known that Laureen had dreams of becoming an actress. Could someone have promised her what she believed to be an opportunity she couldn't pass up, and things went terribly wrong? For about a year after Laureen's disappearance, Judith and Laureen's sister regularly received mysterious phone calls that came in roughly about 3:45 a.m., which, oddly, was right around the same time that Judith initially placed the call to police. For several years the phone calls also came in around Christmas time. When either woman answered, the person on the other end remained silent, then terminated the call. In 1986, a childhood friend of Laureen's named Roger Moraes got a call from a woman who identified herself as either Laurie or Laureen. Roger's mother had answered the phone, and the woman on the other end claimed to be Roger's ex-girlfriend. The caller has never been identified. Could any of these calls have been Laureen? Was she attempting to ask for help, but was unable to bring herself to speak up? The call stopped several years later, when Judith remarried and moved to Florida, changing her number. She firmly believes that at least the first 3 calls made from California were Laureen, and she also believes that at least one of Laureen's friends knows something, but are refusing to talk. 2 other disappearances took place around the time that Laureen went missing. 25-year-old Denise Denault and 15-year-old Rachel Garden. Although Denise was older than Laureen, they did bear a close resemblance and lived only 2 blocks from each other. Rachel was from a nearby town and also looks similar to Laureen. It has never been proven if these cases are related in any way. Personally, I am convinced that the so-called physician associated with the teen sex hotline and Dr. Z is either the same person or 2 people who were working together at the time. However, there are so many other questions that arise when you look at this case. Why was Laureen targeted? As there was no evidence of a struggle, this means she must have walked out one of the doors willingly, begging the question of what led her to do so. Had someone been watching her and chose this day, when her mother was out of town, to abduct her? I believe all the light bulbs in the hallway were unscrewed for this sole purpose. Unscrewing them on all 3 floors may have been overkill, but the suspects most likely just wanted to cover their own asses. What was the so-called physician's reasoning for trying to lead police toward Annie Sprinkle, and what did his wife have to do with runaways? The only theory that comes to my mind with that question is that this person was involved with pornography, possibly even child porn, and knew Annie from the industry. Back in the 70s and 80s, the adult film industry was much seedier than now. Think of the Wonderland murders. While Annie Sprinkle may have had nothing to do with kiddie porn, she may still have known of this physician Dr. Z, and may have even crossed paths with Laureen, not realizing she was a missing child. Could the physician Dr. Z have had a falling out with Annie and threw her under the bus, not only out of spite, but to throw off the authorities? I believe that whoever was at those motels in Santa Monica and Santa Ana holds the information needed to discover what happened to Laureen Rahn. Regardless of whether or not Laureen is still alive, I feel it's only fair that Judith learn what became of her daughter.
Number 6.
Robbie was last seen in Salt Lake City, Utah on October 7, 1982. He reportedly escaped from the Youth Diagnostic Center with another boy and was never seen or heard from again after this. The boy who ex-sped with Robbie was later located and claimed they both split from each other once they were off of the center's grounds. Investigators originally assumed he was a runaway since he had done so before. He reportedly ran away from his home prior to his disappearance and once ran away to Colorado, where he took laboring jobs like roofing in order to get by. He began to get in trouble with the law in 1978 and always committed minor offenses. A month before he went missing, Robbie was arrested for tobacco violation and was placed in the center he escaped from. The Youth Diagnostic Center was a juvenile detention center in 1982 located in Salt Lake City. Authorities were considering to refer him for the Utah Boys Ranch, a residential treatment facility. Robbie did not like this and was very against this idea. Robbie's mother and police are now considering that he might have met with foul play after his escape. Robbie was said to always be in regular contact with his mother and would always let her know when he was in trouble. His mother never heard from Robbie again after his disappearance, and there have been no reported sightings of him since 1982. He also failed to collect a substantial inheritance that was due to him on his 18th birthday on August 2, 1983. Robbie's mother was able to find out that he was in the Boulder, Colorado on March 16, 1984. He was reportedly using the name Bobbert Casper. This is reportedly the only trace of Robbie's whereabouts since he disappeared in 1982. At the time of his disappearance, Robbie resides in Provo, Utah. He was adopted at the age of 11 months, and he was well aware of this when he disappeared. His mother said he seemed to show little to no interest in locating his biological parents or his half-brother. It should also be noted that Robbie is no longer wanted by juvenile authorities. Robbie's disappearance remains unsolved. He was declared legally deceased in January of 1991. His case is classified as a runaway with many agencies. If you have any information concerning this case, please contact Provo City Police Department 801-651-6210.